Welcome back to another episode of State of Tel Aviv and Beyond podcast, featuring one of our regulars and a State of Tel Aviv favorite, Katz. He and I do our best today to make the chaos in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank make some sense. Today, we focus on the continuing volatility in the Gaza Strip. Food is scarce, military operations are continuing and unrelenting. Hamas is battling with rival clans in the Gaza Strip and primarily for control over food supply, because that means power in the Gaza Strip today. In the middle of this podcast, we play a long clip, 4 minutes. It's in Arabic with English subtitles. It's a really important clip. It was just released this morning, Sunday morning. The man speaking in the clip is the head of the Gaza clan that is openly challenging Hamas. This group has been alleged to have been cooperating directly with Israel, which this commander denies stridently. This clip was reported and released by the New York-based NGO Center for Peace Communications. I'm Vivian Berkovich, former Canadian ambassador to Israel. Let's do this. Sunday, June 8th, shortly after noon in Israel. Always good to see you, Katz, even if we are finding ourselves in the middle of even more insanity.
Well, if it wasn't insane, it wouldn't be interesting, would it?
I don't know. I'm starting to think there might be a threshold for all of this. Maybe we passed it long ago. No, but all joking aside, I mean, you wake up every morning with a slight sense of dread, at least I do, before looking at the news and thinking, what does the day bring? And it just feels like it's not just in Israel and in Gaza and the Middle East. The whole world is just hurtling towards craziness. And I think that the online social media gong show last week of these, they started out like the Piers Morgan, Natasha Hausdorff, then it the same day moves into Elon Musk, President Trump, moves into Simone Biles, Riley Gaines, the athletes. Like it's just like there's such a charged angriness everywhere.
Well, hold on. Simone Biles, what did she do? I totally missed that one.
You missed that one. And there's another one.
I just mentioned her the other day as like this, amazing athlete. Okay.
Well, you're going to have to...
I'm going to have to come up with better examples in the future.
So, the very in a nutshell version is this. That Riley Gaines, who has been championing, biological females only in women's sport and has become something of a kind of icon for that movement, wrote a book. I happen to worship her because she's a swimmer. I like to think of myself still as a swimmer. But, when I read her book and reading about her training workouts, I was just like, wow, I want to be Riley. And Simone Biles took a run at her.
Okay, but not about Israel. Not Israel.
No,
okay.
there's no.
For all I know, they're all
sport.
trashing Israel these days. Okay, fine. I can manage. Let them deal with their stuff. Okay.
I want our listeners to know that clearly I have much more diverse interests than Yaakov does. Like, if we're not in that tunnel, all right, let's go to it. We don't have a ton of time, as always, and we have more than a ton to talk about. Yaakov, I want to start today with the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. This is this NGO, Israel-based, that has been in the news a lot lately, seems to be the kind of nucleus of this new system that Israel is trying to develop and implement to facilitate humanitarian aid, food distribution in the Gaza Strip. So I think everyone's accepting that for whatever reasons, whether it's Israel's blockade, whether it's Hamas hoarding, civilians in the Gaza Strip do not have adequate food. I think that's a non-controversial proposition at this point. Correct me if you think I'm wrong in a moment. Mm-hmm. But let's just work with that. And so Israel said, well, we can't continue to distribute through UNRWA and Hamas because that just encourages a continuation of this vicious cycle we've been on for years and years, where Hamas controls all the food, that gives them power, they're violent, they hoard, they extort and exploit their own population. So we're going to try to develop a system that works around them, that cuts them out. Enter the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation.
Now in its third
And
leader.
now in its third leader, and I believe in its third week of
Something like that.
operation.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and there has been almost daily terrible reports of shots fired, people dying. It's very difficult, as you and I both know, to get reliable information from any source, including the IDF spokesperson's unit, on what exactly is going on. Is there shooting? Who's shooting? Do you have verifiable evidence one way or the other? What are the facts? And I spoke last week about this issue with Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricos, who I'm sure you know well. And we were kind of drilling down into this issue, and he has worked in the IDF spokesperson's unit at very senior levels. And so he was able to kind of help me and our listeners and viewers understand the kind of regular basic protocols that the IDF spokesperson's unit would implement before engaging in an operation like this food distribution, which is certain to be scrutinized by media, possibly violent, very complex. And what we can surmise is that all or some of these protocols may not have been followed. That I attribute to him. He said it. So I'm really interested, because you always bring a fresh, different, and feisty perspective to what's going on. So start from the beginning, if you would, Yaakov. What is Gaza Humanitarian Foundation? Who are its partners? And what are they supposed to be doing? And what has gone so awry? Tell that.
Well, it's a lot to
In
unpack.
5 minutes or less. In 5 minutes or less.
I mean, here's the thing. I think let's break it down to a couple of pieces. Piece number one is it's a important initiative, and it's an important objective, which is to disconnect what Hamas has done until now with grabbing humanitarian aid, hijacking it, and basically perpetuating and self-sustaining itself. And therefore, by cutting off that umbilical cord, by taking the humanitarian aid, not just sending it into Gaza where Hamas was grabbing it and then making money and keeping itself going, there's an initiative that basically separates between humanitarian aid and goes directly to the people, bypassing Hamas, which is still on the ground and in control of some parts of the Gaza Strip. So that itself is an important idea. Why did it take so long for us to get to this point is a whole other question, because maybe this could have been done earlier. And all those claims that Israel had made all along that Hamas was hijacking the humanitarian aid, was reselling it, was making money, etc. I mean, maybe that all could have been avoided, but the idea is a good idea. Now, how it came about, though, is of course, in unfortunately, in what we've seen in the management of this war since the beginning, is everything is just upside down, right? It came into being in a way that it was unveiled, at least to the public, was that it was some initiative, international humanitarian organizations came together, U.S. defense contractors, as if it was something that had nothing to do here with Israel. The truth is that I'd heard mumblings or rumblings about this for a while, and the involvement of some of the people who later came out to have been involved, but wasn't able exactly to put all the pieces together. But the fact of the matter is that this is an Israeli initiative, and it's an Israeli initiative that for some reason felt that it needed to disguise itself as being something that it wasn't. And I think, when we joked before that it's at its third head of the so-called foundation within the span of 3 weeks, the current head of it is Reverend Johnny Moore. Nice guy. I've met him. Very supportive of Israel over the years, has been appointed by Donald Trump to a number of commissions on religious something or other in his first administration. Has strong ties here in the state of Israel. But, so it seems that they tried to go with the first guy, I forget his name at the moment, very distant, very disconnected, nothing to do with the state of Israel. They've started to come and realize, okay, for this to work, they're going to need someone who is associated, because otherwise people aren't going to want to connect themselves with something that is so clearly and blatantly an Israeli initiative. There have been revelations over the last few days by the Israeli media, particularly one report on Katz, which is the public broadcaster, that the Israeli government has been funding and funneling hundreds of millions of shekels into the foundation itself. And now they're also asking the Americans for about $500 million in funding. So again, the idea is a good idea. It's important to disconnect Hamas from the humanitarian aid and to get to the people themselves. They've distributed hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of packages already, and it seems to be effective in getting that aid to the people who do need it. But the real question I think we always come back to is to what purpose? Like, where is this all leading to? And when you tie this foundation together with the reports of the militia that Israel is now supporting as well, it does raise some questions of the lack of strategy that Israel is using when it comes to Gaza, or if this is the strategy, then I would be very concerned. And before we dive into the militia, I do just want to say one thing also about what has been coming out of Gaza in terms of the shootings that have been reported near the distribution centers. There was that report last week on Sunday, so just exactly a week ago, that there was that 25 or 26, 30 people had been killed near a distribution center. All fingers were pointed at Israel. Israel said it took them a long time for Israel to even say anything. After about 12 hours, Israel claimed it was not involved. They had fired warning shots towards people who were trying to kind of raid the center, maybe, or that distribution area, but that they didn't shoot at them. Lots of different conflicting reports what exactly went on there. I'm afraid to say that it does seem that Israel did kill some of these people. And Johnny Moore himself, right, who's the head of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, said in an interview with ABC News just yesterday that some of the people were actually, in fact, killed by Israel, which goes against what the IDF spokesperson said. So that's troubling to me on a different level of why are we not getting the full story of exactly what's happening on the ground.
Yeah, there's a lot that's troubling about it. And as I understood it, and I'm sure you know this, but our listeners may not. So for anyone who missed the fantastic episode with Conricus last week, you may want to go back and listen to it. But what he spoke about was before going into an event like this. Again, tense, lots of potential for volatility, for physical and military clashes. The IDF spokesperson's unit would typically have, 15 or 20 drones buzzing overhead. They'd have people planted in the crowd with cameras, with recording devices. They'd have other methods that they rely upon regularly to ensure that they have footage, live, quick evidence. And the fact that we've not been provided with this is concerning. And I think that that's what you've just kind of zeroed in on. Before we get to, because I really do think it all ties together and then you can just kind of, fly. I want to throw out one other issue for you to address in the context of alleged collaboration by Israel with an ISIS-affiliated clan in the Gaza Strip. So we'll, maybe start off by just talking a bit about this whole clan environment, sort of we've got Hamas. Everybody in the world's heard of Hamas now, right?
I would hope.
Some think that they're, freedom fighters. Some think that they're terrorists. But there's the next layer right underneath is the clans. So actually, let's just start with that and keep that separate. What is the clan structure and system in the Gaza Strip? And tell us what you know about the particular clan that Israel is alleged to be working with to undermine Hamas control of food.
This whole clan idea, or in Hebrew, which maybe it's Arabic actually, hamulot. It's different tribes. The Palestinians actually come from different tribes themselves, right? If you look in the West Bank, the Palestinian that you'll find in Hebron is going to be very different than the Palestinian that you'll meet in Jenin or Nablus. So the northern West Bank different than the southern West Bank, which is also going to be different than Gaza. Gaza being close to Egypt, being more in a desert terrain, tends to have also a lot of Bedouin roots and people who come from different parts of the region. So the Palestinians are not one type of people. I mean,
it's not a monolith.
Exactly. And therefore, there are different tribes and clans that adhere and are loyal not just to some centralized governing entity, whether it's the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank or until recently Hamas in Gaza, but are also first and foremost loyal to the clan or to the Hamula and to that leader of that group. Uh, Gaza is no different, and we've seen over the years how there are, of course, there's Hamas, and there's Islamic Jihad, and there's PFLP, and then there's other organizations that pop up every once in a while. In a few years already, back when ISIS was the hottest thing in town, you saw Salafi, different organizations that were affiliated to some extent with ISIS. Yasser Abu Shabab is the leader of the Abu Shabab clan, right? Which is has some Bedouin roots. They come from a Bedouin tribe. They're based in the Rafah area in southern Gaza. So I would probably, I don't know this for sure, but I would presume there's probably some Egyptian connection there as well. Abu Shabab is a criminal, for the lack of a better term. I mean, these are not good people, right? And these are terrorists, criminals, radical Islamists. They were looting aid when it was coming in earlier in the war. They had weapons. They were fighting against Israel. They were fighting against Hamas. They were fighting against everyone. These are just, kind of gang wars that you would see on South Side Chicago. You can also see in the Gaza Strip, even without the war that we have going on right now. For some reason, and even before we get into what's happening right now, we have to take a step back. For years, and you know this, Viv, there has been a movement within the right-wing camp in Israel. I've heard about this for decades now, that the solution to making peace with the Palestinians, before Hamas even took over Gaza back in 2007, was to break up the Palestinians into different emirates, some people called it. That was the more, sophisticated, luxurious term to borrow from the UAE, or to work with the clans and to make peace and relationships and alliances with separate clans. So a clan in Hebron, a clan in Gaza, a clan in the north, all these different clans, and work that way and create kind of these little bubbles, as if that's the way. Now,
I want to interject very briefly, because the whole time you're talking, I'm thinking, I wish we would speak in terms of families, which we do when we're talking about Italy.
Yes. Right.
The family.
The family. With
Yeah.
the ring,
I mean,
whose
it's
finger
kinda,
you kiss.
yeah,
Yeah.
it works. It resonates with me, and I
Right.
think with many of our listeners.
I'm
But
like, I'm
anyhow,
seeing
carry on.
Don Corleone say to
You
someone,
know?
"You betrayed the family." But anyhow,
It's a pretty fitting metaphor. Carry on,
definitely.
please.
So, but I also think we have to keep in mind where this comes from. Now, there's some genuine thought into it that maybe this is a way. It's the Palestinians are very diverse and splintered society, and it's not easy to create a centralized authority, and therefore maybe this is more effective. But I think there's also an ideology that's long been behind this, and that is that for the right wing in Israel, they want to prevent a centralized Palestinian governance, right? Because that would deny or prevent the establishment of a Palestinian independent state. So to do this fits into the ideological agenda of the right wing. So it's important to keep in mind why tribes or clans or hamulas, where this whole concept does come from. If we now think about Gaza specifically, there are two major problems that I see with the Abu Shabab clan. And again, this is not knowing too much about him. But number one is the idea that we will give weapons and freedom of movement to armed radical Islamic Palestinians in Gaza, because for now they're fighting Hamas, is the most narrow-minded, short-sighted strategy that I've seen. Israel has been down this road before, has done this in the past with other different groups, and it always blows up in our face. And I just want to remind our listeners that Israel did not establish Hamas. That is a myth and is false. But Israel did in 1973 give Sheikh Ahmed Yassin, the spiritual leader and the founding father of Hamas, the guy in the wheelchair, the license to establish something called the Mujama al-Islamiyah, which was the Islamic foundation that he established in Gaza. And it was supposed to just create mosques and eventually the Islamic University of Gaza and do welfare and good. But when a few years later, Israel found that they had weapons, illegal weapons, because remember, Israel was in control of Gaza then. Israel basically slapped them on the wrist because in Israel's mind, they were using the weapons against Fatah. They were the bad guys. So to have the secular Palestinians fighting the Islamic Palestinians is good for Israel, was the thinking back then. This morphed into Hamas. So this idea that these guys are the solution to our problem, I'm sorry, is just insanity. That's number one. Number two is I think we have to realize, why is the government working this way? Because there is an alternative. Help create a centralized entity in Gaza that will be the governing entity of the Gaza Strip in the vacuum that has been created because of what Israel, has done to Hamas. So why not establish that? Why not create that? We can't create it. I'll take that back. Help facilitate the creation of that entity with the Emiratis, with the Saudis, with the Americans, with the Egyptians, and yes, with the Palestinians. And what's the answer? Because we don't want that governing entity. We want to go back to the tribal system. So we want to prevent any Palestinian political aspiration or success. And therefore, we're because of that political issue, we're doing something that is a clear security risk. And to hear the prime minister say that, yes, we're doing this and this is saving IDF lives and that's why it's good. Maybe today it's saving IDF lives. There is no way that this will save IDF lives going forward.
And we've lost quite a few IDF lives in the last few days, very tragically. I mean, what it all boils down to, if I can, reduce your last 5 minutes of commentary, is divide and conquer.
Yes.
And divide and conquer has always been Prime Minister Netanyahu's go-to strategy. It's all about surviving to the next day, keeping people a little unstable and uncertain. He's a master at implementing divide and conquer, and we're watching him do it now. You mentioned, his repeated comments about how this is going to save IDF lives and, I guess probably, lead to our total victory if we're still saying that. But we both watched a clip earlier today that I'm going to run now for our viewers and listeners with the leader of this particular clan that we're talking about. He's speaking in Arabic, of course. There are English subtitles, and he is doing everything he possibly can to distance himself from cooperating with Israel. Watch and listen to this.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إلى أبناء شعبنا الفلسطيني، بيان من القوات الشعبية الفلسطينية. نحن لم ولن نعمل مع الاحتلال، وهدفنا هو حماية حقوق الإنسان الفلسطيني من الإرهاب حماس، بخصوص ما ذكر عن أسلحتنا البدائية التي تحمي أبناء شعبنا. تورثناها عن قبيلة الطرابين والقبائل والعائلات الفلسطينية. اليوم لا يمكننا سوى التركيز على هدفنا، وهو حماية أبناء شعبنا من إرهاب حماس وسيطرتها الغير مقبولة على الناس، ويجب تنحيها عن الحكم، خاصة بعد خروج مئات المظاهرات التي تطالبها بالرحيل. ليس لنا أي علاقة لا بدول ولا أنظمة سياسية، ولكن هذه الإشاعات كان هدفها تشويه سمعتنا وخلق حالة عدائية بيننا وبين دول أخرى. لدينا مئات العائلات التي تتوجه لمناطق سيطرتنا يوميا من خلال ممر إنساني بسيط. علاقتنا مع السلطة الوطنية الفلسطينية تندرج تحت المصلحة الوطنية العليا للشعب الفلسطيني، وفي إطار الشرعية الفلسطينية القانونية والأخلاقية. وقواتنا الشعبية نمولها نحن بجهود وتبرعات فردية، وهناك مئات المتطوعين، وتمكنا من توفير دعم إغاثي من المؤسسات الدولية، نظرا لتزايد العائلات التي تأتي لمناطقنا هروبا من الحرب والمجاعة. ونطالب بالمزيد من الدعم لمشروعنا الإنساني في إنقاذ أهلنا في قطاع غزة من المجاعة والدمار والتعنت التي تقوم به حماس. بخصوص ما يتم ترويجه عن علاقتنا مع الاحتلال، لم نلتقي بأي ضباط ولا علاقات لدينا بالاحتلال. وجودنا هنا اضطراري لحماية العائلات في مناطق يراقبها الجيش، ولو حصل هناك أي تنسيق سيكون إنساني لمصلحة شعبنا في المنطقة الشرقية برفح وعبر قنوات وسيطة. لم نطلق النار على حماس، لكنها هاجمت مواقعنا عدد من المرات، وقتلت من الأبرياء قرابة 25 شخص، منهم أطفال ونساء ومعاقين. لأننا أوقفنا السرقة التي كانت تقوم بها شخصيات وجمعيات تتبع لها تحت غطاء إنساني، ونطالب بالمناسبة الجهات المختصة بالتحقيق في هذا المجازر التي نفذتها حماس ضدنا. لم ينشر الجيش حسب متابعتنا تصريح رسمي يتحدث فيه بالاسم عن الأخ ياسر والقوات الشعبية، ولكن تحويل الكلام عليه كان هدف الطعن في الوطنية الفكرة وترويج الأكاذيب لإجهاض مخطط القوات الشعبية في إرجاع السكان ونزع حضانتنا الاجتماعية، ولكن كل المحاولات ستفشل. لا يمكننا أن نحدد لك مئات العائلات تطلب اللجوء ونقوم بإدخال العشرات منها يوميا. نطالب بفتح ممر إنساني أكبر ليشمل الرجوع لعشرات الآلاف بأمان، وليكن هذا الممر تحت إشراف دولي. نعم، نقوم بعمل فحص أمني من خلال جهاز المخابرات الفلسطيني، وهو متعاون معنا في هذا الشأن لنضمن عدم دخول عناصر إرهابية لتخريب مشروع التحرر من سطو حماس. نعم، لدينا دعم إغاثي دولي، ولكننا بحاجة للمزيد نظرا لزيادة الأعداد بشكل كبير يشكل كافة مناحي الحياة. نعم، قمنا بتوزيع قواتنا بما يحقق الأمن والأمان في كامل المناطق. نطلب دعم إغاثي لتحقيق حياة كريمة للناس. نطلب دعم عسكري بسيط لتسليح المتطوعين الجدد. نطلب عمل دورات لتدريبهم أيضا. نطلب أيضا أن لا ينساق الإعلام خلف ما تروجه حماس عنا واتهاماتها لنا، لا سيما كبرى القنوات العربية التي تعمل لتحقيق أجندة حماس ولغيرها من الجهات الفلسطينية، وليس لديها أي نزاهة أو مهنية. لدينا طموح وطني كبير في التوسع نحو مناطق أخرى تسيطر عليها حماس بقوة السلاح من أجل تحرير الإنسان من هذا الظلم وتحقيق الكرامة. إنه طموح عظيم ولكنه صعب، وكلنا أمل في أحرار العالم وكل المؤمنين بالعدل والكرامة للوقوف معنا. ودمتم بخير.
So, Yaakov, any comment on our clan leader that we were just watching and listening to before we move on to another aspect of the Gaza situation?
I mean, the one thing I'll just say, which you did hint at, is that this has long been Netanyahu's strategy. And if we think back to how Hamas became what it became eventually, the whole idea over the years was that Netanyahu worked to embolden Hamas, allowed for the Qatari cash, allowed in their workers, helped keep Hamas to some extent in power at the expense of the Palestinian Authority, which he refused to work with, to talk to. He demonized every step of the way, all about keeping the Palestinians separate, because the last thing that he wanted was, again, that united Palestinian people, which would have made his attempts to deny or to prevent the establishment of a Palestinian state all the more difficult. So this just follows, like you said, Vivian, it follows that same strategy has long been the same. And, I got to say one other thing, and just on this, if this is, I've heard, and I know you've heard from a lot of people in government over the last definitely 18 months, let's say, that there is a plan, but we have to keep it secret because it will ruin its chances. If this is the plan, then God help us. I mean, because this is not a plan. I'm sorry. This is a Abu Shabab at the most is a local solution to a very specific local crisis on a very tactical level. This is not something that is going to create long-term security and stability for Israel or for the Palestinians, which is what we need going forward.
Yeah, I will share your view. I share your view. If this is a plan, it could be a title of a poem. Okay, let's. I want to shift a bit before we move on to the West Bank. The whole manner in which this food distribution has been planned raises a lot of questions. And this, of course, gets us into what happens inevitably in these discussions, the gutter domestic politics of Israel. So take a step back. We have Benjamin Netanyahu with two knives at his throat right now. One is from the extreme right, Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, who are saying, under no circumstances do you allow humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip or we will bolt the government. Under no circumstances do we withdraw. In fact, we go in, we occupy, and we resettle. Full stop. Oh, and by the way, we are also intending to concentrate the 2 million people of the Gaza Strip into a small area in the southern part of the Strip, and we'll turn that into a new zone area where they can live, that'll be peaceful, where we can control things more. Fine. So then we look at the distribution plans of this Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. And what are the plans? I think so far I hear different things every day, but somewhere between 2 and 5 distribution centers have been set up. They are concentrated in the south, in the Rafah area. They are intended to continue to be concentrated in the south. There are 1 or 2 points in the north. People are required to walk very long distances to reach these centers. You know, you and I have both read and seen reports of people getting up in the middle of the night, walking 20 kilometers, and when they finally arrive at the center, it's beyond chaotic. And then people are shot and all kinds of horrible stories ensue, and they don't get their aid very often. So you have this situation where the food is transported by third-party NGOs from staff from the United States, who I guess are somehow employed by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. It's not being distributed physically by IDF soldiers on the ground in Gaza. Our new IDF chief of staff now, 2-3 months in, Eyal Zamir, made clear, we will not, the IDF is not going to be distributing food. That is not our role. We are a military force. Okay, so the NGOs step in. They start distributing the food in this very, I would suggest, ill-conceived, haphazard manner, geographically problematic. But it completely dovetails with what Prime Minister Netanyahu has to do to appease the extreme right in his coalition, Smotrich Ben-Gvir. It allows Benjamin Netanyahu to say, I'm not letting in food. These are independent initiatives. They have nothing to do with me. IDF's not involved. And by concentrating the distribution centers in the south, it also allows them to say, and hey, look, it starts to begin to implement your vision for the Gaza Strip. What do you think of that sort of theory, scenario, proposition? Because it seems pretty obvious to me.
No, I think you're right. I mean, I think that Netanyahu has been led throughout this war by a couple of competing interests. Interest number one, and maybe not, I'm not going to say them in the order, but interest number one was to degrade Hamas, defeat Hamas, eliminate Hamas, get back hostages. Of course, that's one. Two is his own political rehabilitation, survival, his tarnished name.
Legacy.
His legacy. Thank you. Rebuilding his legacy. And number three has also been keeping his coalition intact. Smotrich and Ben-Gvir come to this with a very clear ideology, which is we want to resettle Gaza. We want to get rid of the Palestinians. Ideally, we want to move them out of Gaza. But when Trump, dropped his bombshell of a plan with the Gaza Riviera, these guys felt like the Messiah had come. Since then, I don't know where that plan is buried, but it ain't on the table anymore. But
I think he lost interest.
I think so. He's got bigger issues right now. But they really, this was ecstasy. I mean, in the live. So they felt that this was what they had long dreamed and yearned for. And they want to see that happen. Now, Netanyahu knows that's not going to happen, but he has to kind of balance all of these with this juggling act all the time. And that includes trying to get back hostages, trying to keep the war going, trying to fix his legacy, and trying to placate Smotrich and Ben-Gvir. How do you do all that is no simple task for anyone, even for the political wizard, Benjamin Netanyahu. Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, right? I mean, let's think about this. We mentioned Simon Bowles in the beginning of this conversation. So the Olympic gymnast, I mean, what Israel has done on humanitarian aid is an Olympic gymnastic gold medal, exercise. I mean, we allowed in, we didn't want to let any aid in. Biden supposedly forced us, we let in aid. Then after a point, we said, no more aid at all. They're not getting an ounce of flour is not going into Gaza. You remember Smotrich saying that, Bibi saying it. Then suddenly we're letting the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, right? We're doing a flip somersault. And then it turns out that it's actually us who are allowing in the aid. So I mean, these guys, they could say one thing, you can't believe a word that they say. It's as good as a whatever. I'm not going to say any metaphors. It's just it has no standing behind it. And I think that they are still trying, though, they're trying to use the aid to push Palestinians to the south, right? As you mentioned, with the hope of trying to get them out of Gaza. That is part of the strategy, right? The Defense Ministry has a administration right now that is meant to try to think about how to move Palestinians out of Gaza. We haven't seen the numbers at all making any impact. But that is something that Ben-Gvir and Smotrich definitely believe in. And through the aid, they hope that they can push them into that area and get them to potentially leave.
And it's just, I mean, beyond outrageous, but I don't want to get too distracted by this because, of course, Bezalel Smotrich, our Minister of Finance today, if there was an election held today, would not even pass the threshold to make it back in. Ben-Gvir, unfortunately, has increased the number of mandates he would likely receive.
Which is, by the way, very scary because, and I'll tell you something, I'll tell you something about Ben-Gvir and Smotrich because I know both of them. Smotrich, I as you can probably tell, no secret, I don't share the ideology. However, Smotrich is a super intelligent man, very smart, ideologically driven. You could disagree with his ideology, but you can sit and have a conversation with him, and you can understand. And he listens, and he's thoughtful. Itamar Ben-Gvir is none of that. And he's the exact opposite. He's a rabble rouser. He just wants to make noise. He's like the guy who, like a bit of a punk to some extent, right? I hate to say that about a minister in our government, but that's kind of what it is. And if making noise is saying something outrageous, then he'll say something outrageous because it'll get him a couple of clicks. That's what he's all about. And it's sad that someone like that, but that's a tale of our times today. I mean, that's just where we are, that these politicians are the ones who go up in numbers.
So I'm going to use that opportunity to segue into the West Bank, since Ben-Gvir and Smotrich are such large and important figures in Israel's policy in the West Bank. And in recent weeks, months, but especially in recent weeks, we've seen horrifically violent attacks by Jewish settlers, individuals who live in various places in the West Bank. They've gone into Palestinian villages. I've tried to read and find out what would cause them to do this: burning houses, attacking people, burning cars, instilling, of course, intense fear. I'm yet to find a reason that causes them to engage in this kind of proactive violence, aside from possibly revenge. Well, you murdered this one, or, I mean, it's this endless cycle of violence in the West Bank. But I don't know, it feels a little more intense these days and chronic. What are you seeing, and why do you think it's happening?
I think there's a couple of pieces to this. Number one is that there is an uptick, no doubt, right? There is more settler violence today, and definitely since October 7th, that there was before that. It was already starting to increase with the establishment of this new government in January of 2023, and with Itamar Ben-Gvir being appointed the Minister of National Security, the minister in charge of the police. There is a feeling among certain circles or sectors within the settler camp, and I don't even want to call them settlers, the residents of Judea and Samaria, of the West Bank, who, by the way, 99% of them are law-abiding citizens, it has to be said. This tiny percentage, this fringe group, is tainting the name of so many amazing people who serve as, there's like 500,000 people there, serve as the backbone of Israeli industry and scholarship and military and security forces, and you name it. But Ben-Gvir, and there's evidence of this now out there, that has told the police to turn a blind eye and to not enforce the law in some of these areas. So there's a feeling by these crazy Jewish, let's call them what they are, terrorists, to go around and think that they can take the law into their own hands. So there's definitely an uptick. I recently read a report by Nomi Newman, who is a visiting fellow at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy in Washington. Was the head of the research unit at the Shabak. She's former head, very high level senior official in the Shin Bet. And I mean, she outlines there how this is turning into a tinderbox and how Israel is basically turning its blind eye and allowing this to happen. Now, why would we want it? Why would we allow this? Why not enforce the law? And because it does a couple of things. First of all, it makes people create a moral equivalence between Gaza or Hamas and settler violence. And it's not. You and I know it's not. But go try to explain that to the world. Because they say, 1 second, yeah, you have this, but we need to crack down on Hamas. We also crack down on Jewish settlers. Two very different things. But the world doesn't get into that weeds, doesn't understand that. Why is Israel not doing more? Number one, for its own name, its own reputation. Number two, why are we allowing people to hurt people, to burn things, to potentially kill people? I mean, why would Israel want to allow this to happen and turn a blind eye? And I think this ties back to what we spoke about before, Vivian. Netanyahu doesn't have the political strength today to push aside Ben Gvir and say, this is what we're going to do. I'm taking this away from you. We have to enforce the law. This is out of control. And this is just craziness that more is not being done. And these images and these pictures and these stories, and they're horrifying for the people who live there. I mean, we want to live in coexistence. Most Israelis want to live in coexistence. Unfortunately, there are groups of criminals and Jewish terrorists, again, who don't. But why are we not doing more to stop them? And you know what? We take the most immense pride when our military and our Shin Bet can track on this phone a terrorist in a tunnel and in Gaza and drop the bomb on a specific angle into the right shaft at the right moment to kill the guy. We can't arrest the people who are behind this stuff. Come on. There's too many cases where you see videos of 30, 40 young men running through villages, burning, breaking stuff, and no one gets arrested. Come on. It's not serious.
No, it's shambolic, and that's being polite. I mean, what you've just articulated so forcefully, Yaakov, I think is very much on the minds of many Israelis and people around the world, myself included. Why are we allowing these terrorists, criminals, to rampage through Palestinian villages in the West Bank? I just cannot.
By the way, it's up 30% this year so far. And we're only 5 months into the year. 30% increase compared to last year.
So we have a prime minister who has all kinds of problems to worry about and competing interests. We haven't even gotten into the ultra-Orthodox refusal to accept a draft conscription into the army, and we're not going to touch it today because that's a whole other episode. So yes, he's got his hands full, Prime Minister Netanyahu, but allowing this violent lawlessness on an ongoing basis, and then to stand back and say, democratic government, democratically elected, okay, but this is not law and order by any stretch. This is not the kind of conduct that any of us associate with a remotely functioning democracy or society. Does he just kind of, like me, I know you're not in his head, but I mean, how do you suspect he explains this to himself?
It's a great question. I don't know that I have a good answer. I can suspect that there's the political issue. He knows that if he tries to crack down or orders a crackdown, it will create tension with Ben Gvir, and he doesn't want that tension. He needs the government intact. He's got the Haredi issue, which he's trying to work through right now. He doesn't need this other political issue at the moment. And in his calculation of what's more important or prioritization, in Netanyahu's mind today, and this explains, I think, a lot of Netanyahu, him being prime minister, in his mind, is an existential issue for the state of Israel. So
Right.
I push back on those who say it's just about avoiding the trial or getting out, trying to stay out of jail. I think Netanyahu genuinely believes that he was put into this job to keep Israel safe and secure. Now, that the fact that he's failed until now, right, and that on his watch October 7th happened, so he rationalizes it away by they didn't wake me up in the middle of the night, they didn't call me, they didn't tell me, they this, that, and the other. Great. But that's where he is. So when he thinks about it, he says, if I push Ben-Gvir, I potentially lose my government, and then Israel will be gone. And so therefore, some settler attacks and condemnations that I'll get from the anti-Semites of Europe anyhow, and he can easily write them off as anti-Semites, which he does, then it doesn't impact him. He's thinking about the political situation here. I mean, if we were to really think about how the world looks at us today, I think you know that you're a former ambassador. I don't have to tell you this stuff. We are isolated on the world stage. The Canadians, the British, the Germans, even our best friends in Germany, the French, of course. I mean, you look, there's across the world, we are becoming a bit of a, I don't want to say a rogue state, but maybe a rogue state to an extent. And
Yeah, well, let's say we're somewhere in that kind of pariah rogue zone.
okay, so does he care? But how does Netanyahu knows this, right? He knows this. He's not stupid. He's got an ICC warrant hovering above his head, right? Why is he not doing something to make us look better, to prevent this from happening? And unfortunately, because there's a lot he could do, right? And unfortunately,
so I want to just make I think it's an important point here is that yes, we've got all this ICC, ICJ stuff swirling around, and a lot of it is not legitimate. A lot of it is motivated by deeply entrenched, embedded, twisted anti-Semitism that has been normalized institutionally. But I think Netanyahu is catapulting to the next level in his conduct.
Yeah.
And when we hear about things like the things we're hearing about in Gaza now and the manner in which food is being distributed, where it's being distributed, the reasons influencing the distribution concentration in the South, we're starting to get onto pretty dangerous territory. And it's going to be more and more difficult for even a silver-tongued, orator like Benjamin Netanyahu to talk his way through and out of some of those situations. I'm being deliberately vague.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, we can maybe parse this in clearer terms if necessary in the future. Before I let you go, Yaakov, we continue to have our hostages languish. I believe there are now 20 still believed to be alive in that hell. We saw, and I'll put this up on the show notes, the release yesterday evening, because of course Hamas loves to make sure that we have our post-Shabbat psychological torture dose every week. And they issued a photograph of Matan Sangaukar, who's been in captivity since October 7th, lying on a floor, sort of propped up on one side with an IV drip going into his arm, and threatening that, the IDF getting a little too close for comfort in their missions in southern Gaza. And if they continue, he'll be killed. My pledge with you, which, I made it, and you just have to abide, is that we at least, speak to the hostage issue once during a podcast, and I think this is the right moment to do it. Does the hostage issue figure in any way into anything that the government of Israel seems to be prioritizing?
Of course it does, right? Of course it figures in. It figures into, is there a possibility for a deal or is there not? And unfortunately, right now, it seems that the talks are not going anywhere, despite some earlier optimism with the new Witkoff framework and outline. It figures into political considerations. If Israel's going to go to an election, does Netanyahu want the election to be with Israel after the war, with the hostages home, or does he want the elections to take place when Israel is at war, so he can create that stark contrast between him and who might try to run against him and succeed him? There's a lot of considerations here, and unfortunately, they all mean nothing, because the reality is what's the strongest, and that is that someone like Matan Sangaukar, with the picture of that IV and his life in danger, is all that really matters. And without getting them back, I went to a vigil or I guess you could call it a protest on Shabbat morning near where I live. I try to go there every Saturday morning. And someone said to me, we didn't know that you are, you sometimes write in support of this or support. And I said, listen, this is not a political issue, right? This is just we have to do everything to get them back. I mean, that's just as simple as it comes. So we can hope and pray and protest.
Well, on that sort of saccharine but genuine note, I'd like to thank you, as always, for your time, your thoughts, your insight. But I'm going to make you do one more thing. What do you think the chances are we're going to elections soon?
It's very possible that we will, and it's possible that Wednesday there will be a vote to try to disperse the Knesset. But if I had to bet right now, I would. I think it's not going to happen this week, but I could be totally wrong.
This week. All right. Well, we'll come back to this, Yaakov. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
Always great to be with you.
If you're still with us, then that means that we're delivering something of value to you. And I really appreciate you sticking with us and your interest. Please consider supporting us financially with a paid subscription, or you can go a step up and support us as a founding member. We need the support. We are truly independent. We rely on our subscribers who value our work to send us the resources to continue doing it. A lot of you are listening every time religiously, and it would be wonderful if you would express a different level of appreciation for our work. Thanks again.
We love hearing from you, so please comment on our website, stateoftelaviv.com, or send us a note to hello@stateoftelaviv.com. On behalf of the State of Tel Aviv core team, Yon Zabo, our creative, graphic, visual, and marketing man, Amir White, producer and editor extraordinaire, sound guy, who is also impressively patient with me and my boomer tech deficiencies, and our social media manager who pitches in on everything, Maya Naftalin. Thanks to the team. Thanks to you for being here. We'll be back soon.